We are live.
All right, welcome back to the House Judiciary Committee this Thursday morning, April 2nd, continuing testimony on S-209, and we'll turn to Lee Sparrow. Thank you very much for being available today. Identify yourself for the record and proceed.
Yes, thank you. And thank you all for this work. It's been really inspiring for me to see your conversations and the depth to which you're taking this. So I appreciate that. For those of you who don't know me, I live in Westminster West, which is just north of Brattleboro. Um, for 30 years, I was a professor at School for International Training. I have a doctorate in language, culture, and literacy. And then mid mid-career was ordained and have been a UCC pastor for 25 years. And currently I'm working most as a volunteer, but extensively with refugees in our community through St. Michael's Refugee Ministry and in concert with ECDC, which is the refugee organization down in Brattleboro. But during my career training teachers for public schools, and then um, also worked with the Community Equity Collaborative as a pastor, working with racial and multicultural issues in the high school. So I know some of the issues. I was really interested to hear your previous person talk about the schools, and I wanted to offer just two things, but one in response to your first person, the doctor, and then second to the other, just really quickly that might be helpful. And then I'll just offer my testimony. And if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer. So one of your colleagues had asked about data about non-citizens or children from other cultures in the schools. And I've called a colleague and I can send that to Nate. One of you was asking if we have data, and we do have data, lots of data. So I'll make sure you get that. I called her, and
Sure.
it may happen before you close today, but if not, I think, is it appropriate to send it to Nate and then he
Yes,
could?
please. No, that would be great. Thank you.
All right. I also just wanted to, because you were talking with the Dr. Green about the sources of fear. I just wanted to mention that I personally work with two families. We have what are called co-sponsor teams. One of them is Eritrean and is here as an invited refugee, and the other came as an SIV from Afghanistan. And that offers a contrast. So I just wanted to mention that every family is very different in terms of how secure they feel. So Afghans at the moment feel very secure because they came as allies, and they have their green cards, and they trust that the government is going to protect them. So they have very little concern. And sometimes I wish they had more concern, but they don't. And the Eritreans are different in that I don't know if you know that all green card applications have been halted. So where they were just flowing through and people could trust that they would have a status, for the last year, there have been no new issues of green cards. So that's a very different way to be living, is just wondering if it will ever if that will ever change. And we don't know. So that's a sort of ambiguity that people live with. And I just thought that might be interesting to know. The other thing I would just mention is that depending on the levels of literacy in English, people have very different sources of information. So some depend a lot on TikTok and their communications with other people, sometimes in other states, and others tend to be working in environments where they have access to really current information. So there's a wide range, and I think that really affects how different families feel in relationship to a sense of fear. So I just wanted to offer that. Um, my own testimony uh, is relatively brief. I just thought I'm just here to provide information. So I live and have worked in Brattleboro, and in Brattleboro, most uh, what we call churches or faith communities have childcare facilities. In fact, I was counting them up, and I think there are 5 or 6, all of whom have childcare facilities that don't necessarily have affiliation with the church, but the church is the building where those facilities are held. So by nature, these buildings, whether or not it's a Sunday morning or a Saturday or a Friday night, oh, sorry. That's the person calling with the information about the schools. So when we're talking about places of worship, we're also talking about facilities that have various things going on. One church in particular, Center Church in Brattleboro, has 4 different faith communities worshiping in one building, and they also have a food pantry that serves 1,000 families twice a week. And then there's Bridget's Kitchen, which operates out of the near the Catholic Church, which also operates 2 or 3 days a week. And one of the evangelical churches also has a food pantry. So that they are by nature places where people who are at their lowest of the, who are very vulnerable, are likely to be. And often they will be there for other reasons, just because churches and faith communities are thought of as places of sanctuary. I'd also like to mention that I'm assuming I was invited to talk about places of worship. So I would just like to also mention that within the last few years, as you know, places of worship, like schools, have become targets for violence. So we already, maybe 10 years ago, did trainings for what to do if a mass shooter were to come, and how we were supposed to proceed, and what we're supposed to do. And that's very, as you were talking, as we were hearing about, children and families worrying about the safety of going to school, there's already a ripple of
Are you comparing mass shooters to law enforcement coming into
No,
for civil arrests and things like
no,
that?
no.
Okay.
I'm just saying, even before this whole immigration thing happened, we already were on tenterhooks. We have a fantastic police. Our local police are fantastic.
I'm just having trouble making the connection between mass shooters and police
I thought
doing
I
their
was
lawful work.
gotcha. What I'm trying to talk about is why places of worship are sensitive locations. So I thought that's what I was supposed to be talking about. So
No, I can appreciate that, but this bill does nothing to deal with mass shooters.
no, I'm just sort of setting the scene that we're already have heightened anxiety, and I'm sure any of you who attend worship may have gotten that training. So it's already heightened, and then now we have many refugees that worship with us. So that just adds to our concern that what is supposed to be a place where people can come to worship, and when they're in a time of vulnerability, that they feel vulnerable. So I guess if I'm talking to this actual bill, I'm just hoping that you will include places of worship along with schools, along with places where vulnerable people gather, is that it is a place where people come not expecting anything other than a chance to be peaceful and create community.
So we have a question here, Zach. Please, thanks for your testimony, and I appreciate you working so expeditiously to get that data for myself and my colleagues in the room. I think that you're operating on lightning speed, and I appreciate that. Specific to places of worship, I have a couple of questions, and I don't know, what denomination is your church? Not that it matters, I'm just curious.
No, it's congregational. So
Congregational, okay.
United Church of Christ.
Okay. So the reason I ask is, so I'm a practicing Roman Catholic, and when you pray the novena or you're praying in adoration, typically you have time periods that could extend from 12 hours, if it's a shorter adoration, but it can extend as long as 48 hours. And one of the questions that you probably heard in the lead up when I was asking of legislative counsel was specific to how long
because this bill is a really nuanced bill, right? And it captures people in transit to or in transit from some of these, sanctuary spaces, right? If that's what we're going to call them, or safe spaces, or whatever the language is that we want to use. Do you have a sense of how long that person should be able to remain in a church in one of these sanctuary spaces? Because if I'm praying in adoration, I mean, I'm not likely staying in a church for 48 hours. So I feel like 48 hours to me seems like a very reasonable cutoff. I'm just curious if you, as someone who's also, practicing their faith, I'm curious if you have a sense of that time period.
Well, I'm a pastor, so I feel like everything that is supposed to happen in a church anytime is sacred. So it's not just the prayer time. I mean, it could be counseling time, it could be any
Right.
time. So frankly, I probably am not the best person to put a timeline on it because I
But
really feel that churches by nature are supposed to be held sacred. And unfortunately, I think we're living in a time where people have forgotten that. I will say, and I don't know that this is speaking to your issue, is that um, back in the 90s, we had a period where the Weston Priory, for example, had some Guatemalan refugees there in sanctuary. And I know another church in Amherst where they had a man who was seeking asylum who was there for 2 years and never left the building. And the assumption was that the building itself, whether people were praying or not, was a sacred space. So I personally, that would be how I would think of it.
so
Once
your
people leave the building, then it's a whole other question.
right. So
If
your
you're
parish
talking
is
about,
open.
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask. Your parish is open 24 hours, 7 days a week.
We
Yeah.
used to be, but now, of course, we've had to lock it. So
Right.
that's a whole other thing. So I don't know. I wish I could answer your question.
No,
Because I think you're saying is what's the longest time we'd ever be having a worship service, right? Of some kind. Is that what you're asking?
4 hours of operation, because I think that really kind of puts a fine point on it. Because I was looking to go to a Catholic mass here the other day, and they only offer at 8:10 and 12:15, and they're closed in between those mass times here in Montpelier. So I do think that there's a reasonable question here about what hours of operation look like, because to your point, you're not open 24 hours a day. So if someone's looking to seek asylum, I assume that someone isn't going to be seeking asylum in a building that's locked.
Right. That makes sense. The only thing I would say, if I could have a little
Sure.
addendum, is that the church that I pastored for 20 years is also the emergency shelter. So there were times during the winter when we would have people there 24 hours a day. So um, I guess if we have working hours, not be the ones posted on the door, but as long as people are in the building, something like that, that would be reasonable, I would say.
I understand that. And that makes a lot of sense. And again, I'm not sure. My last question is, are you a 501c3 or a
Yes.
501c4? You're 501c3.
Yeah.
So presumably you have a tax code
Yeah.
that you report to the IRS.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that we were debating earlier is what really is a place of worship. And I
Right.
think very clearly, if you're a registered 501c3 and you have a tax code, within the state of Vermont, that to me signifies that that is a tax entity and that is a place of worship. So I think we would want to maybe look at that as a potential definition in the legislation itself of what is a place of worship. Because I think that, the legislative council kind of didn't have an absolute answer there. And I think there actually probably is a definition that we can arrive at and agree.
I'm glad you say that because when you were talking earlier, of course, it was not appropriate for me to cut in, but I would say that that's a way that the state already discerns what is a
Correct.
place of worship, and yeah, to me that would be to me it seems logically that would be a perfect way to define it. Yeah.
I agree with you. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Karen.
Yes, I think this is a question for you, Chair. I don't know if it is important or helpful, but for terminology, I feel like we are like, what is the word to use? It's safe space, sanctuary space. I feel like in the bill, it's referred to as sensitive location. So I don't know if that helps us to be like, let's use the term that's in the bill.
Right. Other folks are, using verbs, but yeah, sensitive spaces is what it is in the bill. Yeah.
So Lise, thank you so much. Great to see a Windham County
Likewise.
Yes. So I think my only question is for the reality of like in Brattleboro having places of worship that are also childcare areas and also food shelves, and maybe providing other services. Do we feel like, and I don't know if you have the language of S209 in front of you, but do we feel like the way that we have described this in section is it C1D is sufficient?
Gosh, I have to go to another screen to look at that. Can,
And I don't want
can
to put you too on the spot on it. I just want to make sure that
I'd be happy to look at it and then respond to you.
yeah, if you want to,
I'm sorry,
I want to make sure that we've kind of done a full wraparound on that we're not leaving out, especially if our intention is that we're doing childcare service.
Yeah, the other thing to mention, and you know this too, Ian, is that one of the churches also houses our homeless shelter,
Yeah.
wet shelter. So that's another whole. But I think that is in the bill, at least from
That
what
one
I.
is, and I think that would be captured under it. I'm not sure about the childcare though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think, yeah, no.
Well, it's a question for Ian. Are you referring to the definition of pre-qualified private kindergarten provider?
Yeah. I don't know.
So we could, we're still need to have, Beth St. James, that perhaps answer those kind of questions.
Yeah.
So we'll be having her.
Okay.
Is there something about early childhood education because that would probably be the term.
I don't know enough about it to understand whether.
I promise to look and write you.
And it sounds like we have another witness that.
Yeah, we'll be able to weigh in on that
Okay.
for us as well. That'll be sometime next week, I would assume.
Yeah.
Anything else, Lise?
Let me just, of course, this is always nervous making. I'm just trying to. No, I guess I would just say feel free to use me as a resource for what's going on as far as the refugees, because that's something that I'm really, I mean, I am a pastor and I know a lot of the churches in the state. So if you needed more information, I'd be happy to get that for you. But I really appreciate you taking this up. I think it's really important. So
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony.
thanks.
So we'll go to Mark Redmond next. Thank you, Mark, for being available.
Good morning, Chair Lalonde and other members. Thank you for inviting me to testify in S209 today. My name is Mark Redmond. I'm the Executive Director of Spectrum Youth and Family Services, and Spectrum has been around since 1970, so 56 years. Primarily in Burlington, but in the last 5 years, we've expanded to Franklin County as well. I've been at Spectrum for 23 years. I've actually done this kind of work for 45 years. And we're definitely in favor of S209. If you look at section C1D, it lists off the different social service establishments, and it's got homeless shelter in there, and we definitely do that. Substance use disorder counseling, we definitely do that. And an establishment distributing food or other essentials of life to people in need, we definitely do that. In Burlington, we have 2 separate shelter spaces. We have 26 beds altogether in Burlington. And youth have to be at least age 18 to stay there. And they can stay up to their 24th birthday, but that's unusual. And this past June, we opened up 10 beds in St. Albans. And we have a drop-in center in each city as well, where youth can come in and receive breakfast, hot lunch, hot dinner, get clothing, take a shower, do their laundry, use the computers. And also we do substance abuse. We have 14 licensed mental health and substance abuse counselors on staff. So last year we worked with almost 2,000 different young people. And when you look especially at our shelters, the young people who are coming to live in our shelter, It's a lot of young people who've lived in poverty their whole life, a lot of young people who are in the foster care system, and now they hit age 18 and they leave DCF and they frequently try and go back and live with the families where they might have been removed from when they were babies. And many of the same problems that were there then are still there, and it often doesn't work out. Then they start living with friends and they couch surf. And then before you know it, they're living in the back seat of a car, they're living in a storage unit, they're living in a tent somewhere, and then they come to us for help. And the drop-in center, it's interesting. In Burlington, it's mostly 18 and above. These young kids, same thing. In the children's mental health system, that's another big driver. Youth who are in the children's mental health system did well. Now they hit age 18, and you think, okay, now they're going to go into the adult mental health system. Well, they may not have the right diagnosis. Their IQ may be too high. So there's a whole avalanche of youth who end up becoming homeless after leaving the children's mental health system. So young people come to our drop-in center, and I was up in St. Albans recently, met a young man. They're younger there because there's no Boys and Girls Club up there. There's no YMCA up there. It's really us. And I saw a young man, he was 15, and I just always ask, and I'm just curious why you come here. And he just matter of factly said, oh, I come here to escape the violence in my home. So it shows you, the level of poverty and distress that they're in, and really the trauma that they've already experienced. So that's why we're in favor of this bill, because it's not a house of worship, but to me, it's our shelters, our drop-in centers, that's a sacred space for youth who've really been traumatized, really have emotional disorders where a lot of healing needs to take place. We have a very good relationship, I feel, with Burlington Police Department and with the St. Albans Police Department. When I was interviewed 23 years ago, the board of directors said to me, we have a terrible relationship with Burlington Police Department. So that is something that I really, really worked hard on when I was hired, and I've worked hard on for 23 years. If the police want to question a youth that we have, or if they have a warrant, they know not to go into our drop-in center. They know not to go. They know to call me, or they know to go to the side door and look for a supervisor, you know, and we handle it that way, in the same way in St. Albans. And if there is a youth who is charged, recently we had a youth who was charged, and I even got Gravel and Shea to provide a pro bono lawyer for him. And we had very good resolution to that case. So I just really believe, I'm glad to see this bill. I think it will help us. It will just provide a degree of safety and security to our staff and to young people who've really been through very difficult time in their lives. And we have a lot of success stories. We have a young woman now who's halfway through her master's degree. The first time I met her was 5 years ago, and she was living in the back seat of a car. So we have young people going to college, young people getting their own apartments, young people learning how to be plumbers. And it started with coming into our drop-in center and getting lunch. And they're frightened when they come in, but they learn to trust us, and we work with them and we help them find work, go back to school, learn a trade, open a bank account. We even have someone on staff teach them how to drive a car, which you have to learn in Vermont. So anyway,
right.
we are in favor of the bill and appreciate the bill.
Yeah, we have a question here.
Yeah, you talked about your relationship with law enforcement in the Burlington area. And it sounds like it's working out pretty well with, they'll contact, you or supervisor or
Yes.
whoever before they do anything. And I'm gonna assume, and maybe I shouldn't, but that you may know what goes on in the rest of the state just because that's the industry you're in. And is it a problem in any parts of the rest of the state as far as law enforcement just busting into these facilities?
I have not heard that. We're part of the Vermont Coalition of Runaway Homeless Youth Programs, and nobody has said that they've had those kind of difficulties. So I'm going to hope that I'm hoping they have the same cordial relationship that we do.
Yeah,
I
I gotta
haven't
believe
heard otherwise.
if it happened, you'd probably hear about it. It'd be in the papers.
Yeah, it would.
Especially in this day and
We
age.
used to be in the papers a lot. I'm glad if we're in the papers now, it's for something good.
No, no, that's great. So, I mean, that gives me pause as far as why we would need the bill to protect something that's not happening.
Right.
Just a question I have.
Oh,
Not
why
necess-
I don't know. To me, it's just reassure, at least it's reassurance for us that, it would be in statute. And I don't know. We'd love to see that.
Yeah.
Ian.
Mark, thank you very much for your testimony. So 28 years ago, the relationship with the Burlington and South Burlington Police Department wasn't good.
Yes. Well, 23 years ago. You
Oh,
were
sorry,
close. 23 years ago.
23 years ago. So is it possible that in the future that relationship gets strained?
It's possible, but I hope not. I mean,
I hope not,
anytime
too.
we've had a new police chief, I'll be honest with you. My first week on the job, I walked in to meet the police chief. I won't say who it was, and she turned to me and said, "Spectrum, boy, do you have a long way to go to get the reputation of your agency back." So
Whoa.
I did ride-alongs at 1 a.m., 4 a.m., went and met with and we really repaired a lot of the relationships, So anytime there's a new police chief, I'm in that person's office within the first week. I know the lieutenants, and we want to stay on a good positive. They nominated me for some citizens award last year. So, it's a relationship. Same thing in St. Albans that we have to work on.
Yeah. So it's relationship based, and
Yes.
this statute, if it were to go into law, would provide a statutory protection that would not be based on a relationship between your institution and any police department.
That's true. But I would advise any other director like myself, okay, even though it's in statute, my advice would be go and do what I do, right?
Yeah.
Go and get to know those officers, go and get to know the lieutenants, be on that just don't rely on a legislation. It's personal relation, especially in Vermont, right?
Great, thank you.
Sure.
If I could just say something really quick, I remember Spectrum well before you were there. You've done an amazing job with Spectrum now.
Thank you for saying that. That means a lot. Thank you for saying that.
All right, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for being available. Oh, I'm sorry, Zach, go ahead.
Thanks, Mark, for being here. And I just want to get a question before we
Sure.
wrap up. So I think what I'm hearing from you, and this is kind of piggybacking off of Rep. Goodnow's point, is that you've done the hard work. You've been both proactive in creating a productive relationship with law enforcement, which I think is a model that so many agencies and groups could learn a lot of lessons from. And I think it's very admirable about the great work that you're doing, helping Vermont's children, which I think is great. One of the questions I have, because one of the things that has come out in testimony today, and then when we were talking about this bill prior to crossover, was that there really is an undertone of this bill that is very specific to immigration enforcement. And so what I'm curious about, insofar as your experience with Spectrum, is how many instances are you working with youth that are part of this population of non-citizens in Vermont?
It's not a big percentage, when youth come in, honestly, we don't ask, what's your status? Show us your, you know what I mean? Like, if a youth is hungry and needs a sandwich, we're going to give them a sandwich. If they're literally sleeping in a tent or on the back of a car, we're going to take them into our, but my impression from our staff is it's a small percentage, It's mostly Vermont youth. There's this myth. They're all coming here from out of state. No, they're not. These are Vermont youth who come from poverty, been in the foster care. We all know they're in all of our districts. They're in all of our areas, right? young
Yeah.
people who've really had a difficult experience.
Absolutely. As someone who represents Rutland County, we see it, every day. And,
We used to be in Rutland, and I want to be back in Rutland. I want to be back. I know you need what we supply.
Yes, we
So
do.
offline, let's talk about that.
I would love that, Mark. And so I think one of the questions, and when, during your testimony, you were talking about youth trauma and violence and how that is extremely disruptive, in the homes, obviously, and potentially deadly for children that are impacted by these behaviors. And I'm just curious because I think, again, very specific to this bill and what's seeking to accomplish is, do you have the sense that the impacted youth that this bill could be seeking to help are disproportionately impacted by violence and trauma in their families and in their communities?
I think they are. I think
Okay.
I think it's disproportionate. I agree with
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mark. I appreciate you being available. So we'll next go to Cal Hale. Please join us. Identify yourself for the record. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. For the record, Cal Hale, testifying on behalf of the Vermont Library Association, or VLA. And thanks for inviting me in today to share our position on S209. The Vermont Library Association is an educational nonprofit that works to develop, promote, and improve library and information services and librarianship in Vermont. The organization is Vermont's chapter of the American Library Association. We have over 300 members, including public, academic, and school librarians, as well as library trustees and friends. VLA supports the objective of S209 to prohibit civil arrest in sensitive locations. I'm joining you today to ask that your committee protect the safe and stable environments in which libraries throughout Vermont provide a multitude of services to their communities by adding public libraries to the list of sensitive locations where S209 would prohibit civil arrest. In making this request, I want to highlight the increasingly broad role that libraries play in Vermont's communities and the wide array of programming that Vermont libraries provide. Libraries stopped being quiet reading rooms a long while ago. They're now vibrant and lively community spaces, and in many rural communities, they serve as a lifeline for community members to access important resources. The Working Group on the Status of Libraries in Vermont's final report in November 2023 documented this evolving role and some of the ways in which libraries fill social service gaps in communities. This report characterizes libraries as the only gateway to the digital age, the only place where patrons without reliable home internet can reliably access resources online. As more and more resources are accessed solely through the internet, libraries are an increasingly critical space for patrons to access judicial proceedings, legal information, healthcare, and numerous social services, all services that S209 seeks to protect. Librarians have shared with me some of their experiences of patrons regularly utilizing library resources to send and receive materials related to immigration proceedings, print court documents, seek information about their rights, and access space for meetings with social workers. Libraries have served communities and community members in their most vulnerable moments, functioning as flood recovery hubs, food distribution centers, and extreme cold weather shelters. New Americans in particular are served at Vermont libraries through Vermont Adult Learning's Services for English Learners and a variety of programs from the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. For students, libraries are an important third space, a place where they can spend time and access programs outside of home or school. Libraries offer numerous educational opportunities, including after-school and summer programming, and frequently serve as hubs for students to gather at the end of the school day. In these communities where libraries effectively serve as an extension of local schools, it is important that students utilizing these spaces have the same level of protection that they do at educational institutions. The inclusion of libraries in S209 would benefit both patrons and library staff. For patrons, it would ensure consistency in the bill's impact. As Vermonters access the essentials of life, they would be able to do so in environments that are protected from civil arrest. This would be particularly important for individuals working towards citizenship or legal status, who rely on libraries for access to necessary information, programs, and judicial proceedings throughout their immigration process. For library staff, S209 would provide clarity and consistency for developing policies around law enforcement and libraries. Currently, library staff, many of whom are part-time or volunteers, must understand the complexities of what kinds of documentation permit law enforcement to access different parts of library buildings and library information systems. S209 would offer clear guidance by designating libraries as protected spaces from civil arrest. S209 will not prevent law enforcement from ensuring the safety of library patrons and staff through standard law enforcement practices, including making arrests in cases where doing so is necessary for patron or staff safety. Finally, I want to explain the importance of using specific language to include public libraries on the list of sensitive locations in statute, even if the committee may consider extending the protections in S209 to municipal buildings, as the bill was originally introduced in the Senate. While the inclusion of municipal buildings in S209 would include municipal libraries, 73 of Vermont's public libraries are incorporated libraries, not municipal libraries. Incorporated libraries provide identical service to their communities as municipal libraries do. In fact, most Vermonters would have no idea whether their library is a municipal or incorporated library. However, incorporated libraries are chartered as separate nonprofit entities, so they are not included under the definition of municipal buildings. Therefore, regardless of whether or not the committee incorporates municipal buildings in S209, it is important that the following language be added under Section 1, subsection C, to ensure the inclusion of all public libraries. And that's public library, as that term is defined in 22 BSA 101, sub 2. Thank you for your consideration of this request, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I appreciate you being here, Cal. And I guess one of the questions I come back to is actually in relation to testimony that we just received from Lise. And I think you were in the room for that. One of the things that she spoke about is in some parishes, people can seek asylum for a period of up to 2 years. And I'm just curious whether you can confidently say that the Vermont Public Library System has the infrastructure and the ability to sustain asylum seekers for a 2-year period inside your facilities.
I don't think that the Vermont Public Library System has that capacity, and I don't think that's the intention right here. This is about protecting library patrons at times when the library is open, while they're accessing services that we feel are consistent with the services they would be accessing at a lot of the other places.
Sure, and I appreciate that. I do think that access to a library is different than a church, than receiving healthcare. I love a good library, but the services are different in terms of what's being rendered to patrons. And like with all legislation, it might not be the intended consequence. It might not be the intended stated goal of the legislation as passed, but our job is to kind of suss out what the unintended consequences could be. And I think that is where one of the concerns that I have among many with this legislation is what the unintended consequences could be and what it could potentially lead to. And you telling me that the library system could not sustain someone for saying forget 2 years, even a month. I mean, the local library that I have in the town of Castleton, they already have very limited operating hours, just like the churches here in Montpelier. So I think we do have to try to understand the scale and scope of what the unintended consequences could be if this legislation passes. I appreciate that the intent is well intended on your part and what your clients are looking to accomplish here, but I just have real reservations about what this could lead to. Yeah, any other questions for Cal? Yeah, Angela.
Not a question, but just a statement of support. And just like the point about libraries and the many social services they provide or facilitate, maybe not direct provision of those services, but I know for sure in my district, our library is steps away from the elementary school, from the 3 through 8 elementary school. And the library for many years now has just opened their doors to kids of a certain age after school coming in and just being there, being in community, being safe, being cared for at a public library. And it's really an amazing thing. And I agree wholeheartedly with the point that any protections that are extended to kids in school should, it's actually quite logical that they would be extended to kids and adults, but, you know, particularly kids in the library.
I actually have a question piggybacking off of what Rep. Arson just pointed out, because one of, I think, the struggles that we see, especially between maybe more urban areas in Vermont versus more rural areas, is the disparity in resources. And I think my question to you is, in terms of what the Vermont Public Library System is seeing in terms of funding, would you say that's is it increasing or is on the decline historically over, say, the last like 3 years?
Library funding over the last 3 years?
Yeah, would you say it's on the climb, that a lot of libraries have the resources and the programs that were just mentioned? Or do you, because I see cost cutting. I see a lot of libraries that are having to restrain resources because they just simply don't have the budget.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I'm sure there's libraries that have seen funding going up over the last 3 years, libraries that have seen their funding going down. I'm happy to connect with the association and
I would love that.
yeah, I'll try to get you some
data.
follow-up information on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Cal? All right, not seeing any. So just for folks, at 11:30, we have to turn to another bill that we're trying to wrap up today and actually have a vote on. So I don't know, I don't want to shortchange the other two witnesses. Jessa, do you want to kind of get started and then come back, or?
It'd be very brief.
Okay, yeah, let's have Jessa and you can be brief, but we like to ask a lot.
Well, that's okay. I'll keep it brief.
And I apologize, Lauren, that we might have to reschedule.
Jessa Barnard. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Medical Society. It's been a little bit since I've been in this committee. So I'll just remind you, we're a physician and physician assistant membership association. So we're really speaking on behalf of the individual professionals, not necessarily the institutions or facilities. We want to express our support for S209, and Dr. Andrea Green is one of our members, and I think she did a great job. So I did submit written testimony. I'll try to keep this brief. The one piece I want to add in terms of healthcare is actually the impact on the healthcare workforce. A lot of our healthcare, not a lot, a growing proportion of our healthcare workforce are not from Vermont and come from other states, other countries, speak other languages. It's actually an area of policy we are trying to support. We have a shortage of all spectrum of workers in our healthcare systems, from the folks who provide brain surgery to the folks who are cleaning the rooms overnight in the hospitals. And so we need everybody working together, and this and we've seen in other states, but we've also have real feedback from here in Vermont that the fear of immigration enforcement activity has led to people feeling concerned about showing up at their workplace and coming to work in healthcare. Maybe you had this background in your first walkthrough, so I apologize if I'm repeating, but there was guidance around healthcare, federal guidance around healthcare being a protected location. With that being rescinded, we're really left with institutions trying to navigate kind of what's a public space and what's a private space under the Fourth Amendment, which leads to some difficulty when you're a healthcare provider, you're not an attorney. It's a complicated situation right now. And both patients, as you heard from Dr. Green, and employees are feeling concerned about showing up and being even in healthcare organizations. The testimony I submitted, we had another family physician who really wanted to be here today, Michelle Dorwart, and she was not able to be available. So I just encourage you to read her comments as well. It's in my written statement. I can leave it.
So have there been any immigration enforcement action in the hospitals or medical facilities that you know of?
Off the top of my head, I am not. I know there's been a lot of work, and we've provided education for our members. The Hospital Association has as well, around the sort of the delineation of how to respond to different types of warrants or court documents and what places. I'm not aware of any in the facilities. There, was an example of somebody traveling to their workplace in the Burlington area a couple months ago. But that, I don't believe that took place in the workplace. I think it was while traveling to the workplace.
Question? Yeah.
But we had this problem a couple of years ago with the healthcare workers getting assaulted and all this stuff, and we passed that bill. So I was under the impression that actual incidents have declined, even though we still have this serious lack of mental health care that's needed and stuff like that. Because as I understand it, it's more that, and it's more the drug use, whatever you want to call it, on that. So I'm still not 100. I'm not even close to being 100% convinced. I'm more worried about this bill doing more damage and bringing more bad actors to the front and knowledgeable to do more bad things, if that makes any sense. That's my concern. Do you think about that?
I hear
way?
your question. I think those instances that I'm aware of are really more criminal issues around assault and violence against healthcare workers and not enforcing civil warrants. So it would be a different, and it's, interfacing with local law enforcement around criminal violent behavior, not around enforcing civil.
Okay, so let me be more precise. We have somebody going there and using their facility as an excuse to be there and causing a commotion and putting others at risk for doing what they're doing in that vicinity. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do understand your
I
question.
don't want to give people more ideas.
Yeah, no, I do understand the question. I would think, and I am not a criminal attorney, but I would think if there were, I don't believe, and maybe it's a question for Ledge Counsel, that the language in this bill around enforcing civil warrants would preclude a facility itself from calling local law enforcement to enforce, to prevent criminal violent behavior happening in that location. So I do understand the question. I don't think they are in conflict. But you could ask legislative counsel to, clarify as well.
Thank you. That's more my.
Yeah, I understand I appreciate your question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Zach, I have a question about following up on the testimony that the VPA provided, and I think you're in the room for that. How they have very clear guidance for educational professionals across the state that, ideally you're not to engage federal law enforcement. If they insist on entering a school or whatever it might be, if they're coming to a field or practice after school hours, you're not to engage. I'm curious what your guidance is for medical professionals in the state, whether you have a similar guideline that you really, if federal enforcement is coming in, probably best idea is not to engage with them.
We as the Medical Society have not put out our own guidance. We do have resources on our website directing folks to other sample policies out there that certain hospitals or other organizations use. And then it's up to each organization or facility to craft their own policy based on that. But we don't have our own organizational guidance. Again, we're in a little unique position. We work with a lot of folks who work in facilities, but we don't represent, say, the hospitals or the federally qualified health centers. We're really working more with the individual providers.
Right, but I think that also would be incumbent, especially even in private practice, right? I think of specifically in Rutland by the hospital, you have a ton of private practices that are supportive administrative offices to the hospital itself. So if you're going to go see a specialist, a lot of them, you're not walking into a hospital facility, you're walking into a small mom and pop office that has been in operation for several decades. So I think it could, the disparate application of the policies, and I hear you that some policies might exist in hospitals or in some offices, but the disparate application could present some really potentially dangerous scenarios if medical professionals in the state of Vermont are intervening in a federal law enforcement operation, especially if it's legally authorized. And it could put your professionals in a really dangerous position. So I think I'm just coming from a place of concern for Vermont's medical professionals that it seems like there really should be a policy in place.
We provide, I'm happy to send you the link to our website. We have a lot of resources on our website that folks can get and modify to their practice.
I would love that. And I would also love some of the anecdotal evidence that you have of medical professionals feeling concerned. And, the similar emotive landscape that we were talking about earlier. I would love to see kind of quantifiable and qualitative evidence of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jess. So I don't think my next witness for the next bill is online yet, so we can get started, Lauren, and if we just run a few minutes later on the other bill, that hopefully won't take that long anyway. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. For the record, my name is Lauren Hibbert, and I'm the Deputy Secretary of State for the great state of Vermont. We are here to support this bill, and just ironically, I have Sean Sheehan, the Director of Elections here, and ironically, as we were walking over, he told me that the bill that prohibited firearms in polling locations was also S-209. So there is a theme with S-209 protecting our free, fair, and impartial elections. We support this bill because we want people to feel like they can exercise their constitutional right to vote without fear and without concern. And we have heard from voters, but also from town clerks, concerns about federal law enforcement, civil and criminal, coming to polling locations. This makes sense because that has been stated by the president, that he will send in law enforcement into polling locations or operationalize the National Guard, both of which would be problematic to have free and fair elections. There are already several federal statutes that prohibit law enforcement from being in polling locations. We talked about those a lot when we were talking about S-209 of 2003. And so or perhaps it was 2004. In any case, we talked about it quite a bit. And I'm happy to provide those statutes to the committee. I plan to submit a one-pager that we provided to all the town clerks in conjunction with the Attorney General's office in response to concerns about federal law enforcement, not state or local law enforcement, to be candid. We've had a really wonderful relationship with state and local law enforcement and with the FBI in anticipation of the 2024 election. We had a summit. We had, we were doing tabletop exercises for what would happen if the internet went out, what would happen if there was another flood. We were preparing for a wide variety of unanticipated things, because when you have to pull off an election that only occurs on one day, you can't control what's going to happen on that day, and you need to be prepared for anything. So we were working with local, state, and federal law enforcement in anticipation of that election. We anticipate that we'll be doing the same in anticipation for the next. And actually, the National Guard was there too. But with the discussion nationally around elections, and with the president saying that he wants to utilize law enforcement in polling locations, it has caused some concerns. And so we put together this one pager for town clerks. I will provide it to the committee, but there's several federal laws that specifically prohibit military or federal officials at polls, and also armed people at polls who are part of the military or federal officials. There's lots of laws around voter intimidation, both at the state level and the federal level. And we have provided guidance to town clerks with the Attorney General's office, which is very much in line with what Jay was speaking about. We recommend to the presiding officer, who is the town clerk, to politely and firmly tell agents that you are responsible for maintaining an orderly election and that you need them to leave the premises. If you believe that a crime has been committed, call local law enforcement or Vermont State Police, and then to call us here at the Secretary of State's office, our elections division, and we will coordinate with the Attorney General. So that's the advice that we're giving town clerks right now. And this is in direct response to town clerks asking us what will happen if ICE comes to our polling locations. Now, we have some locations in our state that allow.
Before you go to that,
Yeah.
it's Tom and Ken have a question.
So there's some, that was federal law or a state, I think it was federal law, you said, that doesn't allow like military and armed.
Yes, that's federal law.
At polling places. But on the other hand, this bill will allow undocumented workers at polling places.
I don't believe that it allows undocumented polling workers at polling places. There's nothing in here that specifies that undocumented people can work in polling locations. This bill doesn't address that topic at all.
Okay, if they're not allowed. Well, some towns in the state do allow it because they allow undocumented people to vote.
I think she was just about to get to that. But
Some communities have passed charters to allow for undocumented people, non-citizens, to vote on only local matters. This body has approved those. But that also does not specifically say that people who are non-citizens can work in the election. Whether or not that's happening, I don't know, but that's not dictated by federal law, state law, or in charters.
So we have passed laws that do allow it as long as the town passes it.
So the town has to pass it, and then it needs to come through the charter process. And then it needs to come before the legislature and get passed by the legislature and presumably signed or overridden by the legislature.
To me, and I'll ask you, would it make sense to have wording in the bill to protect just those polling places and not all polling places?
No, we support this for all polling places. And I'm going to echo what other people have said. There are people who are non-citizens who are married to someone who is a citizen. There are people who are citizens who are legitimately afraid that they will also be targeted by ICE. There are people who are concerned that regardless of citizen status, that law enforcement will be coming to polling locations during the election season and be watching for citizens, non-citizens. And that in and of itself is a chilling effect on voting. And voting is one of our most sacred and most important rights that we hold as Americans. And we need that to be free and fair and impartial and allow citizens to come without fear and without any concern to come cast their ballot.
What types of federal law enforcement can go to a polling place? You had mentioned some.
At this point, based on the law, it would be none unless there was a crime committed.
This law.
In federal law.
Okay. Thank you.
Ken, Zach,
So I'm kind of lost to this whole thing. So we're worried about federal law enforcement being around there for protection of all, hopefully. The same as state, same as local and stuff to protect a certain people that are voting. But, and I'm going to use the word segregated. It's like, okay, we're going to protect this level here, but we're not going to protect the average or the other people that's there, right? What about their fear?
Well,
I mean, this bill sounds so politically motivated that it's like it's going way over the top that people can, I mean, you can disagree with me and that's fine, but I mean, this is all about controlling an election the way whatever the current president spiels out there or not, there's a level of concern at all of our levels. Like, why does my rights not count and everybody else has these special rights? I don't have a problem with federal people being there, right? Is that because I'm a white privileged old guy male? I mean, I don't understand that.
I
Try to help me here.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think we as a nation have had a long-standing tradition of law enforcement does not participate in elections. That's part of training of law enforcement. They only attend elections if there is a crime that is being committed. So it's not just particular communities that are unease. And I say this with a lot of respect to law enforcement in the room, because I think that law enforcement has a wonderful, sometimes damaged, but on whole, wonderful reputation in our state. And it is unsettling to have law enforcement at a polling location. That has been why that federal law has been in place. I don't believe that it wasn't put in place to protect any one person or one group of people. I think it was put in place because that is not the appropriate place for law enforcement to just be.
Well, unfortunately, the political divide is certainly showing up in this bill, and that's really, really, really sad.
Well, so what I think this bill does is ensure that law enforcement continues to not be at polling locations, just like they have not been historically in this country for a very long time.
Right. And we can hopefully respectably agree to disagree. So
Well, I'm not sure what we're disagreeing on, quite frankly.
I personally don't have a problem if we have a situation that all sides are certainly interested in, and it's certainly been out there widely, whatever, that a lot of voting has gone on. I mean, it's very simple. I got carded last night buying alcohol. I mean, but I don't get carded. I don't have to prove that I'm a resident to go and vote. I mean, it's screwed up. I mean, and we can say it's not politics, but you know what? It is. So whether anybody wants to admit it or not, that's fine.
So
I think I would love to talk to you more about that if I could. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So I'm gonna have you back next week, because I know there's at least 2 questions. I have questions, you need to answer that, and I have Erica Marthage, and this is a bill that we need to get out. So we're definitely gonna have you back.
Great.
There are some questions still, and sorry to have to be back here, but you're just on the street, so that's okay. Because I do want to get to Erica and Kim on S-183, since we have Erica here. So
Great.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I look forward to coming back. Maybe I could be more at the beginning of the schedule next time if I
Yes,
may ask.
you will be the first person.
Thank you.
Yes, you will be the first person. Thank you for being here. Kim, do you want to go first, and then or how do you want to go about this? This is S-183 we're turning to, and that's the home improvement and land fraud bill. And over the
Different topic. Yes, I have a few overarching remarks, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bennington State's Attorney Erica Marthage, who handles home improvement fraud cases directly and has the most intimate knowledge of these cases versus my background as a prosecutor. I never handled a home improvement case, not once. But I would like to just speak to the bill in general. For the record, Kim McManus with the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. It is wonderful to see you all, and thank you for accommodating my schedule for being out for a little bit. First, the amended language to this bill that adds in the knowingly entering a contract and knowingly the intent to defraud, knowingly piece, that does, we believe, address the issue that was raised coming out of a few Superior Court decisions about some of the unconstitutional potential issues with our current law. One thing we want to caution the committee, and we raised this in the Senate, is that this language is not a cure-all for the home improvement fraud issues, in that any of these cases that are a mix of fraud and contract dispute, where it's hard to know when the fraud starts, those will continue to be an issue and a problem for us to bring forward. And I believe this has been discussed in the past. contract disputes or civil litigation with civil law. We're trying to handle them in criminal law, and it does not go well. It is not what we do as prosecutors, so we're always sort of in this other land, working with experts to work through when the contract fell apart and who knew what when. So we just want to make sure that the committee is well aware that this does not solve our home improvement fraud issues. As a department, we highly encourage the legislature to continue to look at what civil support there could be for these issues that are contract disputes. And again, State's Attorney Marthage can give you some examples of when it's clearly fraud, theft, larceny. Those are going to get charged. When it gets really murky about when the person's trying to defraud, was it at the very beginning of the contract? Did it happen later? That's when things get tough for us, and that we believe homeowners in the state of Vermont need more support from their civil remedies, and whether or not that's the state supporting them in any of those civil actions or providing some additional support, or whether that's providing more regulation to the contractor industry, would be something for this body to consider. So those are our overall remarks. State's Attorney Marthage will be able to give you some more details again about where this falls apart. And I apologize, I did not listen to testimony while on vacation, so I don't know. so I do not know how much you heard about this the other day. But State's Attorney Marthage was provided a ton of knowledge to the Senate, and I wanted to make sure you all had that as well.
Great, perfect. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So Erica, if you could unmute and join us.
Hi there.
Yeah, thank you for being available.
So I just thought it would be most helpful probably to just tell you the kinds of cases I see and what ones I'm prosecuting and what ones we just don't file. Prior to the change in legislation that essentially removed the intent element of it, we had mainly would see cases that were contractor or builder shows up at someone's house, says, I can, yes, I can do this job. I need this amount of a deposit. And then that person either never showed up or showed up and then stopped showing up. Clear cut home improvement fraud. Some of the cases we would charge, I got a little creative with some of them with the charging because it didn't quite fit into the home improvement fraud, but it was, say, for a while we had an individual that was going to elderly people essentially and saying, I can, rebuild your deck or I can do something on your house. And then that person gives them a deposit and either never shows up or does the work that's so shoddy that there's it's obvious that it was either something the person didn't know how to do or they never had an intention of actually doing it right. So those we've been trying to I've prosecuted as false pretenses. If I can get home improvement fraud, I do that. But mainly it's been exploitation of an elderly person, which, elderly person is defined way too young. I want to say it's 60 or 65. So those are easily charged. After the change in the law, I started getting, and I just actually returned one, consumers coming in, they're making reports to the police, but then they're coming in and giving me binders with hundreds of pages of documents, including, contracts, all of the text messages and emails and information that has to do with one couple in particular in Bennington had a huge renovation on their home, and there were multiple back and forths about, I want to change this aspect of this renovation. I want to, change the color of something. I want to change a door. And then the builder coming back and saying, too late. I've already special ordered this thing. And those are the cases that I undoubtedly am declining to prosecute, because that's a contract dispute. That's not something that my office can be involved in. The other thing I've noticed just in the last couple of years is I'm seeing a lot more people that are building second homes, or, they don't reside here. And maybe they have a different understanding or different expectation of what is going to happen when you hire a builder. And as we all know, Vermont is not the same as some other states as far as certification or licensing to be a contractor or a builder. And what seems obvious to me, I mean, I wouldn't hire the guy that shows up and says, I can do this huge renovation for you. And he has no crew and nothing professional looking about him. But they're doing that. And then because the market is so tight, they can't find anybody else to do it. And then they're making complaints to the police when things don't work out. So it really is like a case by case. We probably review, I was trying to pull a report. The problem is we get case reviews and the officer doesn't put a particular charge in there, because that's why they need it reviewed to see if there are charges. So I just was looking through kind of the case reviews that we've done over the last 6 months, and we're probably getting between 6 and 8 in a 6-month period. Of those, 80% of them are not being charged as home improvement fraud. I have, after the decision out of the Washington court, I reviewed all of the cases I had pending. 2 of them I just dismissed without any further hearing, and 2 of them I refiled as false pretenses. So, I think the frustrating thing for those of us in the criminal justice world is that the home improvement cases we are getting, even when we can prosecute them, nothing is happening in the criminal court that is really meaningful, or it's not making the victim whole. It's not preventing this from happening again. I have a number of cases with really what I would call serial home improvement fraud people, where there are multiple people out there that this person has done this to, even after I've charged them with home improvement fraud. So there's definitely a disconnect somewhere with the people aren't checking some registry to see if they're on a registry. Most people don't even know that exists. And to me, it just, the resources and the time and for the criminal justice system to try to do something that in the end really results in nothing, no outcome that is meaningful to the victim or to the community. It's not preventing this from happening again. I hate turning away people that make complaints to the police that, I feel like it is a legitimate complaint. They should be angry. They should be frustrated, but there's nothing that we're doing in the criminal court that's going to address it.
Great, thank you. Karen has a question.
Yes, thanks for sharing this. It sounds like a very frustrating situation that you are in, and appreciate the different ways that you're trying to approach it. I guess my question, but we're not going to solve everything with this bill. Like, it's clear there's more work to be done. But do you agree that this is a step in the right direction and will be a tool to help you with those situations, some of those situations?
Definitely. Definitely, because there's just right now it's just too, I didn't think the statute needed to be fixed to begin with, but then it kind of opened this huge door. So
that's helpful. And here in the situation, it's like, let's do one thing and we'll keep working on it.
Absolutely.
So, any suggested changes or anything? Are you good with what we have?
No,
right?
I'm good. I'm good with what's been presented. I totally, after doing this for a number of years, I understand the baby steps, approach, and this would be a significant improvement over what we have now. Because it does make it, if you all probably know, because you're from all around the state, it's very different in every county, the way it's going to be reviewed and enforced, because it's just so amorphous right now. It's just very gray. And, the courts that are, plus these cases take years in the court system. They're not cases that are, because typically the person accused is not incarcerated. They're in no rush to resolve anything. We have pages and pages of documents, and typically it's a lengthy trial, because we do need to go into really the minutia of building. And so those kinds of cases always make my skin crawl, just because I worry about backlogs. So
I appreciate that. We all appreciate that. So this presumably should narrow the cases that really should be brought at all. This is what we're at. Okay, great. Yeah.
a low-hanging fruit, definitely.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate your work on this and your testimony, and hopefully we'll get this passed out actually as it came over by the Senate, so we can get it into place as quickly as possible. Although it doesn't take effect until July 1st.
That's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Erica, for being available and taking the time to testify. So, all right. So we are adjourned until 2:00, I think, is when we're going to be. And I think Kim is going to be back, right? Are you back?
Back at 2:30.
Is that what we said, 2:30? I think we're going to move it to 2, because I think our floor is supposed to only last a half hour. Yeah, so
That'd be nice for a change.
yeah, so I think 2, and then we can be done.
How many proper announcements we got today, though? That takes a few minutes.
I think that's all. That's all there is. I mean, there's a 1/3 meeting. So we're off live, Nate. So we'll see you at 2:00. And Nate